Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Stand Your Ground Studio. My name is Scott, and like so many other people out there, I've just recently started this channel because I woke up to the deception of this world, and I really needed to get the word out once I got a grasp of what was going on. And my story is that I woke up about 7 months ago, and I noticed that it took maybe 4 or 5 months to really get used to thinking a brand new way while still functioning day to day in my life, and how daunting it must be for anyone who's getting ready to wake up or has just woken up in the last month or two and they're still trying to sift through an endless amount of information with theories everywhere. So what I wanted to do was create a resource where somebody could connect and learn a whole lot at once, see a lot of information for themselves, and get almost like a starter kit, be able to jump out there and research particular topics and notice certain trends. And also I've noticed during that time, during the last 7 months, that a lot of us out there who have woken up don't really have anyone directly physically in our lives who understand what we're talking about. And we're seen sort of peppered out there in the world. And anytime we try to talk to somebody in our lives about anything that we've learned, whether it's a particular topic or the whole thing at once, understandably, nobody really knows what we're talking about. And it's this giant rift that's between us. And it's really nobody's fault on either side of that rift, because that's really not how this works. And what I want to do is also offer this as a resource to anyone who just wants to sit somebody down in front of the computer and just show them maybe 1 or 2 segments of this video or the whole thing, so that there can be a little bit more conversation and understanding, because nobody's going to be on the same page as each other. We're not going to perfectly agree with each other on everything, but it is important to know that we all are on the same team. And offering a warning here, the world is not what it seems, but time is short, and you can see the plunge happening in the markets right now, and that trend is only going to continue. So there really isn't much time left, and we all really want to talk to each other. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in. I will say that below I'm going to post links to as like chapter markers through various parts of the video for easier navigation. Okay, let's jump right in. So first things first, anyone who's just waking up, it's not you, it's the world. You're going to feel a little bit crazy, but the world's inside out, it's upside down. And it's frequently, waking up is frequently referred to as going down the rabbit hole. And that's not by accident, actually. Common side effects we're going to go over, feeling isolated, changing behavior and beliefs. And if you take it far enough, you'll experience some real freedom of thought. If you're really going to go through, you're really going to research this, there are certain topics you cannot avoid. So I'm going to just lay out some context for what that means, common trends, that various people with different beliefs all tend to agree on. Which inevitably means we're going to talk about the mainstream media versus the alternative media. I'm going to share some of my experiences, and in fact, most of what I'm going to share with you is, well, naturally, it's like my path and how I woke up, because that's how I understand it. Viewers can also share how they woke up below, or maybe they can share how they some pitfalls they ran into, and please share some resources. This is all about opening up a dialogue and just really letting as many people wake up as possible, because time is short. I'm going to try and offer some tips along the way of what to look out for. And really, ultimately, this is about getting people to moving on their own path to finding, quote unquote truth. So no one can tell you what your truth is. I can't tell you here in this video, and you can't go on to tell somebody else. It's entirely up to you to do that. You have to find it by your own path. And what I'm going to try to do here is try to make it somehow relatable. How does this show up in your day-to-day life that you would even care, that you can see it and maybe start exploring it a little bit further? And then at the end, we got to ground this all back in reality and just talk about the approaching financial disaster and global conflict that's just waiting to explode. Okay, what's first? All right, so when you're waking up, let's talk a little bit about what you might experience. For me, it was a feeling, this pervasive feeling everywhere, that not just something, but maybe everything is wrong. It was just behind everything. I felt like it was sabotaging every little effort I was making in my life. I wrote an email to somebody once that, you know what, I know something's wrong, and I feel like it's staring me right in the face and I can't see it. And everyone was like, well, good luck with figuring that out. I was like, okay, well, I was on my own. Other people may have had someone in their life kind of like lean in and be like, hey, have you heard about this, or have you heard about that? Or you had something, a topic that you knew bothered you and you were researching it. and other topics kind of came up, and then another one, and then another one, and it just kind of keeps going and going. And what happens is you run into all these really strange theories involving aliens, the Matrix, angels and demons, clones, weather modification, flat Earth, hollow Earth, whatever you want, it's all in there. But people, no matter what their belief system was, and no matter how they, what their background was, and there's a lot of conflict there, they all had one theme, and that's one thing I want to keep bringing up. It's all about context and finding what might be called a through line. And what that was for me was shadow governments and some form of a rigged reality. Now, nobody's totally oblivious to the fact that usually it's a few people who are at the top of a given structure. Usually it's people, in this world, it's all about who you know. But it really kept coming up that behind every industry, behind politics, money, every major category in life, it always comes up that it's the same few people or small groups of people who all know each other, who seem to be behind it. And then they're connected with people in other industries, and you can't quite see it, but you get the sense that somehow they all sort of know each other. And what ends up happening is you got to choose to start to see past this veil of ineptitude and greed. We're constantly shown people just shouting at each other, being short-sighted because, politicians, they only think in 4-year spans, something like that. And yeah, that exists. Greed especially always exists, but it's a little too perfect, it seems. It is a little too sculpted and scripted, for lack of a better way of putting it. And you got to start to wonder, maybe there's a brilliant scheme at play, and maybe the whole world is in fact a stage, and we're being shown a front. And what you're going to experience personally is breaking through a lot of social restraints, because it comes down to how we're hardwired internally and how we all interact with one each other. And because you really got to stand up for what you want to believe, because you're going to run into a lot of obstacles along the way. So that means you have to have the heart to pursue truth. And let's step back for a moment and think about it this way. So we're social and emotional creatures. And I'm going to borrow from the sales and marketing world for a moment here and put it like this. We're emotional creatures first, rational second. We love to think that we have our world figured out and that we have rationalized everything. But really, anytime that you have a buying decision in your life, whether you're literally buying something big, a house, a car, an appliance, or you're buying into an idea like a politician, trying to win you over to voting for him or leading everyone into a new direction where they're going, they have to market the idea to you first. They have to hit you somewhere on the inside before you even care. We have all kinds of rationale for how we do things, but once we become particularly emotional, rationale tends to go out the window. And so when we start buying into something, we have all kinds of emotional tells, and that's how people can figure out what we're thinking. And it's really deeper down in how we function as individuals. We also have tribal instincts ingrained in us from however long ago. So for the longest time, if you were kicked out of a tribe, a clan, a village, and you were on your own, odds were against you even surviving. And this is a survival instinct that we all want to be connected with the people around us. And there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. But you need to be able to stand up and figure out, do I agree with the dynamic of this clique that I'm in, or do I really need to back away and do I need to listen to my own heart before I listen to everybody else? Because if you don't do that, you don't decide for yourself what you're going to believe, your surroundings are going to decide for you. We're all hooked into our own reality on very deep emotional levels that nobody can fully understand. We rarely bump into it. And not only that, but we're all connected to each other that way. Some lessons I had to learn in my life is that, you are whether or not you know it, you're playing a role in somebody else's life, and they don't like, and they don't even know it either. So as soon as you step outside of that role, you're going to come across friction or some sort of disconnect. So when you come walking into somebody's day and you start implying that maybe, they aren't really in control of their reality, they aren't as free as they like to think they are, you're creating a ripple effect and along a lot of emotional connections, and that's going to create some friction, understandably. What this leads to is, do I speak out? There's fear of ridicule. People have a way of striking a tone to get a message across. It's, we've all grown up with that aspect of It's not what you say, but how you say it. So you can be saying, factual stuff and somebody will cut you off, or they'll say something very authoritative that doesn't need to be backed up at all, or they'll do the exact opposite. They'll be very sweet and caring, and they'll understand, but everybody goes through a phase like this, and maybe I'd like to point you in this direction. We understand the world's all crazy and all that. And they're doing that because they love you or they care about you, and they want to lead you back to their reality. Because they don't want to see you go down some, isolated dark path. It's going to be up to you. You're going to run into every reason to brush off suspicion, buy into common perception, or get distracted. And there's all distractions everywhere. And if we allow ourselves to fall back into old ways of thinking, it's pretty easy to kind of get swallowed back up in the old way of seeing things too. So this is something you have to commit to, without saying, you're committing to a club or anything like that. This is for your own sake. What you get out of it is what you put into it is what you get out of it. Okay, so you have to decide how far you want to go. You really have to commit to it. And if you keep going, you may stop believing in this reality altogether. And, if you hit that point and you're really free thinking, and this can be a very, it's a trying time. It's a vulnerable time too. But if you manage to get there, well, let me be the first to congratulate you. You are now a conspiracy theorist, quote unquote. Here's your tinfoil hat. Feel free to adjust it at any time. You make a controversial statement, because that's just the way things are. I personally wear mine with pride, because all that really is a defense mechanism put into people so that they can push away from the truth that you're talking about. But more importantly, they're pushing away from you, and we don't want that. And we need to be careful about what we say. We just don't want to get to a point where we say nothing and we're kind of like agonizing over watching people, buy into whatever the television's telling them. So, another quick note I've noticed is that if you put a mountain of evidence in front of somebody who doesn't want to see it, they're not going to see it. Meanwhile, you can scatter the evidence and try to hinder somebody with the heart to figure it out, and it may take a while and it may hurt, but they're going to get there eventually. It's, again, first things first, it's you, the individual, before we get to somebody else. So great. How do we frame this up in a way that everyone knows what I'm talking about and is kind of cool looking and we've all talked about before? Let's go here. Whether you're in the truth movement, or for me, it was actually coming through the New Age movement first. When I started talking to people, it almost always came up, have you seen The Matrix? And it's used because it's so apt. It's an apt description of what we're going through, or the reality that we're in, we totally believe in. It's behind everything that we do, but it's somehow not real. Now, this is just a movie, and the main aspect is the red pill, blue pill. Do you choose to go, down that rabbit hole, which you'll hear Morpheus say. I'm actually going to hand it over to Morpheus for a second, because he sounds way cooler than I do, and people will listen to him before they listen to me. For the people in the truth movement who have seen it a dozen times, it's about a 2.5-minute clip of Morpheus first sitting down with Neo. This is like the absolute crux of everything they're talking about. And I think I'm just going to let it go at that. Pay attention to everything they say. It's very important.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up. Ironically, this is not far from the truth. Do you believe in fate, Neo?
No,
Why not?
because I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life.
I know exactly what you mean. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
Okay, so Morpheus restating basically what I said earlier, which is that you've known all along that something's wrong is behind everything that you do, and that you can't be told what the Matrix is. So if I come to you telling you exactly my beliefs and you've never heard this before, what context do you have to go by to relate this to what you're talking about? And I challenge a lot of people in the New Age movement who think they're ascending out of this system. They feel like, oh, well, I can, I'm getting all these abilities and I can see the lights in the air. And there's a lot of true stuff there. A lot of abilities that are being woken up right now. But I get the feeling that a lot of those people kind of miss the point of what that movie's saying, and that's that you are a slave. And they're not saying that you're a slave because you haven't woken up yet. They're saying you're a slave because there is a very intelligent system determining everything that you do without putting its hands on you. Another really quick, really important note is what Neo said there. It's like, he says, I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life. And that ties right into talking to people about this. They don't like that. Nobody likes that. They don't want to find out that all along, somebody else has been determining what they do. It's beyond creepy. So I'm going to play one more scene. It's about 40 seconds long. It's the lady in the red dress. And Morpheus is just going to take it a couple steps further.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it.
Okay, so that's a really important point that he's making there, that people are so enmeshed in their own reality. I mean, why not? It's all they've ever known. All they've ever been told, that if you start showing them that it's not real, all the hopes, the dreams, the fears, all that internal stuff that we often don't think about, you're kind of stepping on that. You're invading that. Now the movie goes on to do, it's an action flick made by Hollywood, so they do the whole external us versus them, let's lock and load and shoot up the establishment, and we're not interested in that. One quick note, it is from Hollywood. These are the people that are letting us know, and I'm going to be bringing them up again and again later. So when it comes to talking about reality, it's not about what in this instance right here, it's not about what I think. It's about what you, the listener, thinks. And if you're talking to somebody else, it's not about what you think. It's about what they think. So you're not obligated to come up with your own theory of what's going on. It's about looking at what you've been told your whole life and finding the contradictions that, you don't allow your brain to give into. You don't buy into it. All right. So since we're talking about that, and before we go any further, especially if you're an American, that means we have to bring up this next topic. Okay. First off, this is not a 9/11 truth video. I'm not going to go over all kinds of facts, statistics, politics, money, all that other stuff. Most people already have their minds made up. If you're someone who's waking up, I do have a resource for you, or you want to share with somebody. AE 9/11 Truth was very important. Diving back into this, it's been almost 6 months for me. I got to say, it's extremely frustrating to find anything you're looking for. I think some things have been taken down in the last 6 months. I will say that. But I think more importantly, it's just infuriating for both sides of the argument because there's so much noise and so much information. There's claims and counterclaims. And it's really, obfuscation is the perfect enemy of truth. Just flood it with everything so that everybody has all kinds of associations and they don't know what to think and they don't care anymore. Pardon me, my voice is starting to lose my voice here. Here's my point. Whether or not you were in New York, you know somebody who's in New York or around the buildings, even if not necessarily in America, every single one of us was attacked that day. And we were traumatized, actually. And I use that word for a reason, because trauma, if it's not dealt with, never goes away. It just gets covered up. And we all still have that memory locked into our hearts. So every time this issue comes up, we have all kinds of other memories we don't remember, our body remembers, and that's what we're fighting against. That's why we get obviously that's why we get emotional, but it's tied to the fact that the core of, watching those buildings come down, the core of who you are is just the terror of it. People may not realize it, but they were traumatized that day. If you are going to go this route, questioning tragedy does not make you stupid, heartless, a traitor, or any of those things, despite whatever subtle or not so subtle pressures there may be. But we have to be really careful when we're talking about this because we are, you might, especially if, you get fired up about it, you might be attacking the day that somebody got hurt. And not that we shouldn't be firm about this and not that we shouldn't have this discussion, but just be aware of it. Because while I was first waking up, in the middle of waking up to it, I had a memory pop up in my head. And that was that I was in a Wawa parking lot in a car a couple days after the event. We turned on the radio, and this radio station went out of their way to find every conspiracy theorist they could find, or they could get. And it was, everything you could think of that was on there. And it really made realization dawn on me. So what I want to try is this. If you have a few minutes, let's do this. Let's do a quick exercise. To anybody who's old enough to remember what it was like to be alive on that day, take yourself back. You can even pause the video if you need to. Take yourself back to that day and remind yourself of where you were when you first heard about it. If you're like me and some other people, you heard about it in class or in an office, and you thought some single-engine plane hit the building, and it was like, ooh, not good. Then you saw that, buildings were coming down, and then you're hearing reports of, is it 3, 10, 50,000 people were killed? We don't know. And, the panic started to rise. So go back to that day and start to remember where you were and the people around you, because you probably knew somebody who wasn't sure if a loved one was in New York that day. And just remember the feeling in your chest, the nerves, and maybe you have a lightness in the head, whatever it was that you felt. For the rest of that day, nobody knew what was going on. The news anchors had a really hushed tone of disbelief, and we went to bed not really knowing what to expect. And the next morning was a Wednesday, and if you looked at the TV, lower Manhattan was just covered in all that thick smoke and dust. And just, you still like the reminder of what you were waking up to, but you had to get to work or school, so you had to kind of push it aside and get out the door and get on with your day. And yeah, people talked about it. I'm sure we had a moment of silence, but you had to kind of be functional again. You had to push it back. You had to internalize it just to get through the day. And by the end of the day, just take yourself, slow down and take a few breaths. And just, if you need to, go watch a video of this to remind yourself and try to feel what you felt on that day if you haven't dealt with this. So it's the next day, you're coming out of school, you're coming out of work, you're drained because it was, a stressful day, you're holding all this back, you get in the car, it's been a few minutes, you click on the radio, and now you hear this.
But holograms don't tear down buildings, don't.
That's right. They
make
don't.
holes.
And in fact, the buildings weren't torn down.
What about the big hole in the side that looked like an airplane?
Well, I'll explain that.
We've only got less than a minute here, so.
Okay. Well, before this happened, on a couple of weekends, elevator maintenance was supposedly required, and a lot of teams of technicians went up in elevators to supposedly do service on the elevators. This gave them access to every floor, and they went in between the floors and attached mini nukes, special nukes, and that's how they cut the beams and made it
So
seem.
so basically, you don't believe 9/11 was you don't believe it happened.
No, if it kept.
And click, and you never hear it again. I know when I first heard it, whatever that day was, I heard all kinds of stuff about numbers on dollar bills, the dates. Somebody's cat said something to them the night before, and it was just the dumbest thing ever. And it's like trying to tell somebody something right after a tragedy happened. They don't want to hear it. It's poor timing. This went out of my mind for good. At least for another 6 years. I heard one more like it in 2007, and I had that feeling of what is it like to live in that world of isolation and what you've done to yourself. And it's like that poor person. I mean, you listen to what this guy said, and he's starting to bring up a couple of facts that people like to discuss. But when you've heard something like this, I know this is a more recent example, but when you've heard something like this tied into a real argument, people will never hear it again. So we're arguing against trauma. We're arguing against emotional. There was an assault done. So we need to be careful in how we talk to each other about this topic. But at the same time, we need to talk to each other about this topic. And this is, you combine that with how big the implication is that even one of those locations is not as we were told. The whole thing kind of comes down like a house of cards. And once that veil falls away from your eyes and you can start to judge the physics a little bit better, it really has drastic implications, ripple effects in all directions and on all levels that we can't even imagine. We can still barely feel. This is why that event worked as well as it did. And it's why people will doggedly defend bad science. We're at the crux of reality. This is where they, I'll say it, the ruling elite showed themselves, and they did it in such a way that people will not look at it. It's just turning your eyes away and not believing in it. And also because, now something like that is married to the argument that you're giving. It's up to the individual. Everyone can kind of fill in their thoughts on it below. I'm just kind of laying it out there. So let's say as the individual, though, we have to move on. Video's getting a bit long. Let's say as the individual, you're the one that goes, I don't believe that anymore. This can't be. Like, now you're out, and what happens next? And you enter what I call the Twilight Zone. Anything is true and everything's a lie. And I'm just going to run through these real quick, just to acknowledge them, because some people are brand new to this, or they've looked into it for an hour and never told anybody. So the first thing they looked at was the craziest thing ever. And now they associate that, there's almost like a magnetism. Somebody's going to find the dumbest thing they've ever heard as fast as possible, and then they're done. They walk away. There is some discernment to practice here. So, some theories. Aliens rule the planet and walk amongst us. We're a feeder class. We're going to globally ascend into a higher state of consciousness, and our spiritual brethren will arrive shortly to help us against this low vibrational, satanic, whatever elite. Maybe the Bible was true all along. The earth is hollow. Maybe it's flat. You're going to hear all about clones, HARP, CERN, Planet X, FEMA, a term I used to laugh at, NWO. Almost everybody believes in chemtrails. That one's pretty close to almost everybody. But because that's something you can look up in the sky and at least see. Then I also recommend looking up the 2030 agenda. Any combination of these, you're going to find it. And you're going to find people, they really buy into that belief because they're done buying what they've been sold. And the point is not to, if you hear somebody talking about one theory, that doesn't mean it's married to another theory or that you have to believe in it. Maybe they're bringing up a good point. The last point here is date setting. There's been a lot of doomsday date setting, and that's kind of been done on purpose so that everyone looks like a fool. Just generally avoid it. Just because somebody's setting a date doesn't mean you have to get wrapped up in it. It's just something that has to be mentioned. Just because it's happened before doesn't mean, it's all fake. That's just setting up like the boy who cried wolf effect. So, here's this aspect of it. You have a lot of assumptions that you don't know are assumptions. You think you know these things, and they go very deep. So what I experienced in my personal journey was various times when a portion of my reality just had to give way. I had to give up. There are so many things I heard. In my first search, 9/11, and I'll drop this word in for the first time, Illuminati, you can't get around it. There are some words like that where not even one thought in my head, and I went right around it. I didn't think about it. I didn't touch it. And I don't even remember having one single conversation my entire life about this, but clearly something happened in my past where I knew You don't touch that word. It's just, ooh, it's Crazyville, right? And for anybody who doesn't, I'll just say it now. The Illuminati, it's an outsider's term like me, using it about like a collection of secret societies and these people who are kind of in the know. They're illuminated is what it's all about. It's not necessarily the original Illuminati from the 1700s. But here's an example of where my reality kind of took a turn. Shortly after 9/11, I was looking up whatever I could find, and for whatever reason, the word satanic was already normal to me. Like, satanic is used kind of generically in a lot of circles, meaning it's kind of like there's a lot of greedy, almost blood sacrifice type of people out there who maybe practice Satanism. But I was looking for context, so I ended up finding this guy, Ted Gunderson, some guy who's an FBI senior special agent. You can see on the right, he was the head of a bunch of offices. Was apparently on the short list to be the head of like the main office nationally. And there's an hour-long clip out there where he is talking all about how Satanists are in high places in the world. They're in the CIA. The CIA is bringing in the drugs for the drug war back in 70s and 80s. And every time he got close to them, things got really scary. A friend's wife would die, something like that. And at least several times he kept mentioning this term MK Ultra. And I think I had avoided it up to this point a few times, but he kept saying it. And he was talking about how these a lot of children have been abducted. It's a very real thing and all across the world. And they might show up in cases that he was a part of years later, and they're like totally different people as adults. They're almost like sometimes used as Manchurian candidates, and they've been through, he kept saying MK Ultra, which basically is trauma-based mind control. And yeah, I'll let that sit for a second. Not for the first time, and most certainly not for the last time. I had to be like, what do I live in a movie? What is this? What? Why? All right, whatever. I don't even care anymore. Just say it. Whatever you got to say, just say it. And he kept talking about it, and I was like, okay. I get to the end of that clip, and then the next clip pops up on my feed is the one over to the lower left. And I'm sure a bunch of people have seen it. I'm going to play a couple of minutes from it. The setup is, so again, this is about context. So now I'm hearing all from this supposed authority who used to be in the FBI, and let's swing over here and talk. Now we've got Roseanne on RT in an interview, and what they're talking about here is, what do you call it? Oh, it's like rape culture, and that's, in Hollywood, and how they, maybe propagate that into the world, which in and of itself is a serious enough topic. But a couple minutes in, watch Roseanne dart her eyes to the side and then bring in the topic she really wants to talk about.
Well, I think that, this is a culture of fear, and nobody's more afraid than people in Hollywood. They're afraid that they'll drop out of the top, they're afraid that they'll drop from the bottom of the pyramid, maybe to the middle of the pyramid. But, they're the ones, Hollywood is the one that keeps all this power structure and all this culture of racism and sexism and classism and genderism and all of it in place. They continually feed it, and they make a lot of money doing it. And they do it at the behest of their masters who run everything. So, they're not going to get brave enough to do that. I mean, I think that there aren't many of us who are brave enough to do that. And I'm just, I'm lucky that I can do it, and I feel that I do it on behalf of many people in Hollywood, too. I go to Hollywood parties, or, occasionally I go to Oscar parties and things like that. And people, big stars, people will grab me by the arm and take me aside and say, I just want to thank you for the things you say. And it blows my mind, but that's the culture. It's a culture of fear for sure. And it's a big culture of mind control too. MK Ultra mind control rules in Hollywood. If you don't know, Google that and look into it.
Okay, at this point, my journey started to take a turn, and it was the beginning of one of the biggest turns of everything that I learned about. This is where the rabbit hole really kind of opens up, and it's just, if nothing else, it strikes you as very strange that, why is she talking about that live on TV? I mean, I just heard about it for the first time now. I'm just hearing it for the first time on live broadcast TV. How did I not pick up on this? We have a way of tuning out what we don't know and what we're not supposed to know. And if you want some other examples, you can look in, especially when it comes to Hollywood, which will come up again and again. You can look up, I think it was, I hopefully get the name right because I didn't look it up. I think Randy Quaid went to Canada, and he started claiming all these people he knew who were murdered in Hollywood. You can look up, you can stop the video now and go look up Corey Feldman talking about how pedophilia always has been and always will be the biggest problem in Hollywood. You can look up anything written about, especially people who have, been, who have died or who have been through a lot. Interviews with like Whitney Houston or Michael Jackson's sister. It frequently comes up and they say, we could not get to them during that time. Somebody was stopping us. They have handlers. And you got to realize there's all kinds of implications that there is a system in place to keep these people doing what they are doing. And it started to hit me that maybe celebrities don't quite have the life we thought they did, and that, the ground started to rumble beneath me. You can go take a look at those another example is Dave Chappelle and why he suddenly disappeared. He was offered a $50 million gig or a contract, and then it got weird really quick. You can look him up too. So that brings us up to this next topic, which is all this stuff. Now I'm going to glance over these things because there's no way I'm covering all of it, but you will, if you are going to go down this path and you are going to be researching it, or you need to tell somebody about it, these are the common themes you're going to run into, and I'll hardly do it justice. But again, like I mentioned, the Illuminati, or whatever you want to call them, it's a bunch of different clubs, and it's a bunch of people who know each other, but they don't, it's not everybody knows each other, not necessarily one giant robotic collective, but everybody is part of some, a pyramid, like Roseanne mentioned, that they each have their role to play, and they get something in return for it. So you are going to come up with stuff like, what do you call them, the Freemasons, the Skull and Bones. You're going to want to look up the Bilderberg Group, the United Nations, like I said earlier, the 2030 Agenda, Council on Foreign Relations. Look up a clip where they're discussing how they might start a war with Iran. They just spitball it, throw it out there. Hey, whatever, And there is an order to things, and remember, this is a planet where, it's who you know. It's all about who you know, and the higher you go, there's fewer and fewer people. So, there's an order to these things, and they kind of have. There's this thing right here in the upper left corner. If you haven't heard of them, they're called the Georgia Guidestones, and if you look at the second picture down, that's their top commandment. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. You can see the next one, guide reproduction wisely. Go ahead and look at it. It's the broad guidelines for a vision that somebody has, and there's people out there with a lot of power, and they're all kind of flashing the same signs. They all kind of mention the same words. And if I bring it back to the United Nations and the 2030 Agenda, there's no way I can do it justice here, but there is an order to things, and there is a guideline to how it works, and there is an intended outcome. So some people might argue, well, Freemasons, they do weird things in robes, and they sometimes do good works in the community. I don't know, it's not my cup of tea, but whatever, Just notice how these symbols come up again and again and again, and which brings me all the way to the upper right corner. We've all seen this, and we've all heard somebody say something. We've got that pyramid. We've got that eye. It's the all-seeing eye. And we notice that the eye's inside a capstone that's not quite on the pyramid yet, implying that something's not done yet. And right before I really started waking up to this stuff, I was watching anything I could find, stuff on like aliens. And, and those, there's all kinds of documentaries out there that kind of put this stuff out there, and then they just happen to be produced in a way that makes it look stupid at the same time. History Channel, or whatever you want to call that channel, does it all the time. And I've seen it 100 times before where, they show a picture of the Vatican or D.C., and they draw the pentagram, and it's like, oh, it fits right in D.C. And I'm like, I don't care. I've seen that 1,000 times. Show me the aliens. Where are the aliens? That's all I cared about. After a while, after the 10th, 20th, 30th time you see something, you realize something's up. It doesn't mean also you're going to specifically believe what somebody else is saying. So if I have a particular belief and I'm like, oh, it means exactly this, you might not go to that conclusion, but notice the trends between me and the 5 other people who said that, right? So below the dollar bill, we have the Eye of Horus. Now, this is from Egyptian times, and a lot of people are finding that they really like it. It's a symbol of whatever vague characteristic he was supposed to represent. But at the same time, this shows up again and again and again. And, a quick picture I found that I'd never seen before. It's in our infrastructure. I think that's some structure over in Paris, from what I gathered in the caption. You'll see it everywhere. And that, the IHS logo, the reason why I put that in there is notice how it's about the sun. There's a lot of sun worship. There's a lot of glowing light. There's a lot of illumination. Again, it's a theme, and you're going to see every type of eyeball show up at you. You'll see it in the compass up in the top center, and all down the right side here. And I'm harping on it for a reason, because you're going to keep seeing it kind of everywhere. And over on the left, I put the Pope in there, and he's doing all this stuff that if someone has opened up a Bible will know you're not supposed to be doing to worship God, but within the context of Christianity. But, he's holding up. It's sun worship, yet again. And above that, I didn't look up the name of it. There's a city in Kazakhstan. It's called the Illuminati capital. They've built this whole pyramid. They have all this sun worship, sundials this, and it's an entire city that, you can't find very easily. It's something you want to look up. Again, there's a capital, there's an entire city built to this motif, and it looks pretty opulent. And our leaders will meet there to discuss things, because they all know each other. Let's move on to the center. All right, so on the lower part of the center, there a lot of truthers know all about this. Here is a, time capsule at Denver International Airport. There's the Freemason logo, and up above it we have that beautiful looking thing. It's called Lucifer. But if you look all around Denver International Airport, you're going to find the craziest stuff. Stuff that's shaped like swastikas. You're going to find, over here on the right, they have at least, it's almost like a vision board of what's to come, and they put these big murals all over the place. And that's panel number 1 of a 4-panel storyline, and that is war personified, coming in, slicing through society, killing the dove of peace. You see all these mothers here with their dead children. They're weeping. There's another panel where, war personified has died, and all the children of the earth are handing over all their weapons. There's all this death and rebirth and rise of the phoenix, and it's really spooky to be putting in an airport. And just go ahead and look that up and tell me what you find. This is one of those things where you realize maybe, I don't know about the spirituality, and I don't know how effective they're going to be, but there's a lot of people out there who have access to things, and they have some pretty strange beliefs. That's what I'm getting at. If you believe nothing else, start noticing the intent behind everything that's going on. It's not just some little prank that somebody did. There's a design and a scheme to everything that you're looking at. All right, so these are a bunch of broad interconnected topics that you'll come across, and you're going to have to research them yourself. There's plenty of excellent work done out there. That's how I learned about them. So there's no need for me to really rehash that territory here. What I'm more interested in doing is showing you how this this definitely impacts you on your day-to-day life, so that you can somehow start to relate with it, even in a sense that you just start to question it, whether or not you fully believe in it. So how is this flashed in your face possibly every day? So let's talk about the hand thing. So what's the hand thing? Over on the left, we have Anton LaVey. He used to be the head of the Church of Satan. Some decades ago, he's passed on. And you might think, well, you know what? I'm not really interested in Satanism, but thank you very much. And, there's more to it than it looks like. And just because you don't believe in a certain spirituality or a belief system doesn't mean that other people don't. And sometimes those people have a lot of influence and a lot of access to outlets. So first thing, let's go over what these are real quick. If you haven't heard them before, we've got the Baphomet horns up the top left. It can be used sort of like a curse. We've got the AOK sign, and that's more of a 666, which kind of shows you who you're talking about or what you're talking about, who you're in allegiance to. Here he is doing the one eye through the pyramid shape with his hands. You will notice it looks similar to, or just like, the pyramid shape with the eye on it on the back of the dollar bill, which again was the Eye of Horus. And we've got more of the different versions of the Baphomet horns on the bottom, and I'm going to let Anton take over. And footage is a bit grainy, but you can hear exactly what he's saying.
I understand that. What are you doing?
I'm giving a blessing to the audience.
I don't think they appreciate it. They were throwing it back.
Well, they thought it was a curse. Would you like me to show them how the sign of the curse works?
Sign of the curse?
Completely different.
How does it go?
No, not at you people out there in the audience, but this is the difference.
Aim it toward Red China, would you?
This is the sign of the horns. A curse sign, the two fingers extended. This way, spread apart for sort of shotgun blast, you know.
I always figured if I ever
when
met
it's
the devil, it'd have dirty fingernails. Go on.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
Where?
Dirty fingernails.
Well, that's because I've been fooling around with your equipment.
Never mind. Don't blame it on the studio. Go on with it.
All right.
So that's the sign of the horn, and then what happens? Is that it?
Well, there are other ones, too.
Yeah, what are the other ones?
The other ones, one of them's the pox sign. That's three fingers extended.
A pox on you?
A pox on you. During the Middle Ages, this
Yeah.
was...
Oh, yes.
Okay, so that's one of the first videos I saw where I just, the first time I saw that ever being explained, and you've seen people walking around doing these signs all the time whenever they're at a concert, or they just want to flash, hey, A-OK. But you've also seen this in a lot of other places too, and, you know, somebody might say, oh, those hand signs, they don't bother me at all. And my main point is, you know, the elite of this world would say, oh, that's a good thing. They don't want you to be afraid of these things. They want you to actually have it as be a part of your life. And one way they do that is have people that we think we know and like kind of flash it at us all the time. So, you know, this had to happen. We got to bring up one of these. Okay, so here's a bunch of celebrities. I just grabbed a whole bunch of them. And you're going to see all the signs we just talked about. You got the 666, you got the one eye with the diamonds, you got actually a V thing going on there. That's V for victory, or actually V for fifth age. You notice them constantly covering one eye, which is darkened, one eye darkened, which again alludes to that all-seeing eye that you see on the back of the dollar. And sticking out the tongue, which is like a mocking tongue sort of thing. And you can go ahead and look over all this. And the point I want to make is celebrities, you're going to see this through celebrities, magazines, ads, movies, TV, basically everywhere. And you've been seeing it for so long, you probably don't even notice that you're seeing it. And the thing about celebrities is they're more than just entertainers. These are people we look up to, and they definitely influence us on a day-to-day basis. They do far more than entertain. They actually help shape the world. You'll note, I mean, a basic way of doing it is bringing a celebrity endorsement in, because people trust what that celebrity thinks or says or does, because when they're a personality on the screen, we feel like we get to know them. That's why people like adore them or idolize them, and that's how they bring things into our lives. You know, we feel like we have personal attachments to them. So you really have to be careful about who's telling you what and who's showing you what. And you'll note that this stretches both, you know, gender, age, different generations. We've got, you know, Miley Cyrus and Justin Bieber. We've got Michael Jackson when he's young. Over on the right, we have the Beatles. We have, what's his face, Elvis Presley. It just kind of keeps going. And you will not hit bottom with the sheer amount of material you're going to see. They're always flashing these things. And they'll do very artistic stuff. You'll see it show up in all kinds of articles, and you'll note, and you'll start to see people on a lower level who have no celebrity whatsoever, they start flashing it too. So, you know, just because, a few notes, just because somebody flashes or is seen putting these things out there once doesn't mean necessarily that they're in on something. And just because you are flashing a sign like this, A-OK, or, you know, the Baphomet horns, I know when I'm busy looking at these images for a while, I start actually using the signs by accident. It's because it's very influential. It's very suggestive. We start assigning meaning to these signs in everyday parts of our life. So 2 more quick notes on this one. You'll find you won't find any bottom to this when it comes to celebrities. This is a big part of why they're hired and why they're out there in front of audiences, because they are willing to make certain agreements and they're likable to audiences. And not just because they're likable. Actually, if you really dislike a celebrity or a public figure, they can be hugely influential on you that way too. Take a note on the lower left corner. There's Russell Brand doing the Baphomet horns. You might not be surprised by that, but I'm just going to make a note of it. And also lower center, you're going to see the little puppy dog. He's doing that with his eye too. In my day-to-day life, I have to search for stock photography now and again, and I'm noticing it starting to pop up there too. So you can go ahead and buy the stock photography and make it a part of your corporate communications as well. You know, be a part of the system. Okay, so I'm just talking about this to really get the point that you're going to see this stuff basically everywhere, and I mean everywhere. It's in politics too. and they're pretty clear about it. And if you're, a lot of these politicians here are American, so if you're an American voter and you're really invested on one side versus the other, I imagine this slide is only halfway surprising, because pretty much each side thinks the other one is the devil. And that's kind of the way it's supposed to be, us versus them. Your side's going to save the planet, the other side's going to ruin the planet. They both don't really accomplish anything together. So yeah, we've got, of course, Donald Trump, who's one of those famous figures who gets a lot done by getting people to not like him. And you can run through the whole list of people here. You got representatives of both sides. We've got some people from Europe and Iran. You got the Pope in the lower right corner. One other quick note is, there's a little bit of plausible deniability. We people who talk about this stuff, we do understand there's a surface level meaning to all this. So Michelle Obama striking that pose up in the upper right corner, that's actually a pretty good pose for particularly anybody, but a woman to strike. It's polite, but it's also kind of powerful. It puts the shoulders back. It points a question back at somebody who's giving a tough question. It would serve a purpose. It just also happens to have another meaning to it when it's used pervasively all throughout society. And no hand sign parade is complete without a picture of this guy, Emperor Palpatine. You've probably seen it before, but yeah. So people will think that sign is the international sign of peace. I submit that sometimes people lie so that they don't have to tell you who they are, but they are obligated to show you sometimes, and this is how they tell you right, or show you right to your face, that they're one thing and then end up being another. So yeah, you get the point. You can look this up yourself, and I hear one type of response from people being, well, you know what, I thank you for showing me this. This is a little disturbing. Yeah, they're in their little groups and whatever, but I know how I like my steak. I know how I take my coffee. I don't think it may be a little bit too late for me to be changed right now. I'm not too worried about it, which is fine, except we need to talk about the most impressionable demographic in our culture, which comes through in children's programming. So yeah, here you go. It's just throw it out there. The same symbols are all over the place. You see Nickelodeon. In fact, anything from Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, or MTV, they just slather it with this symbolism. And the cartoons themselves are getting a little bit crazy. And by a little, I mean totally insane. I hear parents saying all the time, they finally sit down and watch what their kid is watching, and they have to turn the TV off. It's gotten out of hand. You've got the pyramid with the eye and a whole bunch of eyes. The lightning bolt is an important symbol to them. You can look that up. You've got the pyramid here, the all-seeing eye with Squidward. You've got whatever the show this is on the left. Those two in the middle, actually, middle left, they're striking what looks like a meditative pose, which these people are not against. They do meditate. But they're also doing the 666 as best. I mean, the guy in the middle only has 3 fingers and a thumb, but he has the hat on it. So you'll see these things pop up, and they'll come in batches of like 2 and 3 in an episode or more. So if, just because you see a triangle or something else doesn't necessarily mean it might just be a triangle. You'll see it kind of like slip in more and more and more in an episode, and they're pretty blatant. Lower left corner, that kid is hypnotized, and he's by the pyramid, which is what this is all about. Right next to that, you see that glowing pyramid with the top hat? That's from a show called Gravity Falls, and I've watched one scene from it, and this thing comes busting through a portal with all his demonic friends and starts declaring, apocalypse this, apocalypse that, and it is beyond disturbing. Even if you don't believe in anything about the apocalypse, it's very disturbing, kind of violent, and he's just loaded with their symbolism, which you can see just to the right. And this is what they do. They put it right out there in your entertainment so that it becomes more and more normalized, and you don't even know you see this stuff anymore, and you think it's a part of your existence. Just above that, there they are, the all-seeing, or the one eye right there, with Nickelodeon, that whole cast on the steps. And at this point, you really got to say, you got to see the intent. They're not doing this by accident. It's like, hey, you were a part of a club. Don't you want to be a part of a club? Don't you want to be cool too? There's Lady Gaga just up above, flashing it again to, the 666 with the one eye. There's Miss Piggy and Kermit. Over to the right, more examples of the goggles effect. Okay, so bottom right, there's this image right here, which I was shocked to find just searching for all these images. You can look up Illuminati Pampers Baby and go ahead and watch it. And if you're not looking for it, you're not going to see it. They slip it in so fast. And that's the whole point. They slip this stuff in really quick so you don't know it's there. And there's a reason why we make videos like this to point it out, because we all tend to think that, well, I'm in control of what I believe, and yeah, sometimes I'll get influenced by this or that, but I think I know what's going on. And really, you're taking in far more information, especially children. You're taking in far more information when you look at the TV or you're in a crowded room than you even know. You have filters built in so that, you can function. You can focus on one thing. You can hear one person. But you're still taking in a bunch of other stuff. With just, if somebody sends you a message once or twice, not a big deal. If it's literally the 10,000th time you've seen or heard something, that could have an impact on you, especially if it's impacting all your friends. Here's a really good example, the best one I've ever heard. You're in a party, and there's a whole lot of people talking in a pretty small space, and you're talking to one person, and you just really want to focus on what they're saying. And it's been a few minutes, and you've tuned everybody else out. And out of nowhere, you hear your name, and you immediately turn your attention to someone who just said it from like a few layers of people away from you. That's the quickest way I can tell you. You're taking in all this information, and you don't know it. Your name, you're so cued into, you pick up on it right away. It's starting to turn into with this stuff too. And everyone thinks they can, rebrand it, turn it into what they want it to be. So, I don't care if I flash the horns. Well, you know what? Just pay attention to what's going on, because it's not the stuff you're aware of that you should be concerned about. It's the stuff you aren't aware of that you should be concerned about. That's why we make these movies. These videos. Okay. Next slide, it gets a little bit graphic, but I do need to show this to you because this is what is in our programming, children's programming. On the left side, we have Katy Perry. She's going to be with a whole bunch of children. And then on the right side, we have all the graphic stuff. I put this stuff together because people are busy and they don't see this stuff back to back. So sometimes you just have to juxtapose this stuff side by side. So here we go. We've got Katy Perry on the left. She's, again, all-seeing eye. We got the gem. And we've got her standing next to all these kids who look up to her or adore her. Now, I have Katy Perry on the side. We have all the others too, Justin Bieber, Nicki Minaj, Miley Cyrus, Lady Gaga. They all do stuff like this. They turn right around and they put imagery like this out there, which your kids are looking up to. I'm going to let it sit on the screen for a bit. I did slip in the Rugrats image right next to it to illustrate a point. If you're an illustrator or an animator, you don't get a job without knowing how to draw the human form, so that didn't get out to the public by accident. Again, Nickelodeon. Again, lower left, Nickelodeon. You can take in the imagery for what it is, and I'm going to very quickly put this up on the screen. And I'm going to stop and mention this. I'm not blaming Katy Perry and Lady Gaga. They did, if you look up videos, there are videos where they say they bought into this. But if you look into some of their videos and some of the messaging, just look up these names and MK Ultra. You're going to see a whole lot of information about that. One of the videos with Katy Perry, I think it's the Dark Horse video. Half of it she's in a labyrinth, just like Labyrinth the movie. The other half of it she's in a mental institution being guarded by orderlies wearing Baphomet masks while her inner child is trying to pull her out of the chair. It's kind of the way of saying she's stuck where she's at and she can't get out. I'll leave it at that. But there are a lot of celebrities who have absolutely tanked and been drained, and it's more than drugs and alcohol and success. And even honestly, even before I learned all this stuff, it really bothered me that people hated Lindsay Lohan and people like that when they tanked because, they have all their money, they can do whatever they want. And, something I would say is maybe not. There's clearly a trend going on over there that they can't get out. I had no idea about all this, but I'd like to show just a little bit of compassion for these people. On some level, they are stuck. Okay, moving on. Here's Anton LaVey again. He's got all these masks. He's got what looks like a gun or staff or a scepter or something. And it's not directly related to this slide, except if you look at Katy Perry at the pole dancing, look in the background, 2 rabbit masks, again, like down the rabbit hole. These are more than just performances. We think everything, it's just art, it's open-ended, you can say or do whatever you want. And, it's just, you're just expressing yourself and everything's equal and all that. But if you start looking at history and what, Satanists or other types of practitioners will do, you'll start to see that there's a similarity between that and the performances on stage. So, on one more slide, I really have to hammer it home. They are targeting our children. They're right there, back to school. Hey, you want the best clothes from Adam Levine? hey, you can be in your own little clique. You can say whatever it is you want, just as long as you flash the signs. So you're going to see a bunch of pictures around the side. There's one from Beauty and the Beast. I just happened to catch that. But these other 4, these are from awards shows. You can go ahead and look up any of these you want, and you're going to see the symbolism plus a whole lot more just kind of flash all over the place. I know Kesha does a lot of blood drinking on stage. There's Katy Perry again in the lower right corner. Go ahead and tell me that's just basic entertainment. Remember, she was posing next to these kids, and this is what they're looking at. You got, again, pyramid, all-seeing eye. They're flashing it at you all the time, and they're making it a part of your entertainment and a part of any initiative that they're doing so that you take it in and you think it's all about what you want it to be. So when people say, it's just entertainment, it doesn't scare me, perfect, it worked. That's the point, okay? Again, on the side, all the eyes surrounding you. They're always watching you. There's Madonna in the lower left corner. And so that's from her performance at last year's Grammys, I think. It's the one where she fell down the steps in perfectly choreographed fashion. And if you don't see some sort of resemblance here to a ritual or something satanic, I don't know what to tell you. There's only so much I can put on the screen before I just have to let you go. So go ahead and look that stuff up. I know some of it's about letting the belief inhabit you, so just because you see it doesn't mean you automatically believe it. But again, please notice the trend. Okay, so what's going on here? What do I think it is? Could it all be manifesting due to something in the ether of the universe? Could it be that we got caught in some vicious cycle where one set of companies started giving the audience what they wanted, and then other companies, seeing that it worked, started doing the same thing, and we got caught in this cycle of success where it just keeps getting more and more crazy? Are we really trapped and have no control over it? Well, here's my point. Let's talk about media consolidation. So I think diversity of opinion is a good thing, kind of like in the alternative media. But here, it's all about consolidation. And this goes on every major facet of your life, whether you're talking about medicine, food, politics, money, media, entertainment. There's a very few number of companies. It's been consolidating more and more and more. People with the money keep buying everybody else out. And not perfectly, they stumble now and again, or antitrust law stops them, and they have to do all this maneuvering and pretend like, they fractured themselves. But when you're in the ballpark of 90% of what we read, watch, or listen to is controlled by a very few number of people, you got to be careful about what they're sending to you, especially when they're under the same umbrellas as, say, defense industry and government and all this other stuff. They've just created the illusion you have all these choices when really they're just putting out there, it's the same few messages made to look like they're arguing with each other or they're competing with each other. Not that it's 100% like that just yet, but we're getting there. Okay, so you'll note there's some difference between the two pictures. That's because they're from slightly different times. GE sold something out to Comcast. The landscape shifts over time, so I'm just pointing that out. Real quick, when I was in college, I had a class, media studies class, and the teacher put an article in front of us. It was like 2004, so we're in the middle of Iraq, all that stuff. She stripped out all the identifying information. She had us read it and then asked us, what do you think it's all about? We're like, oh, it's about the war in Iraq and everything going on. She's like, we all unanimously said that. She's like, no, it's about the Spanish-American War. It was like dead on copy for what we had been reading and hearing all day long when, the war propaganda was just pounding us back in the 2000s. What I'm saying there is that there's really nothing new under the sun, and you really have to be careful because when there's a big event coming up, typically, and this is known throughout history, governments will set you up ahead of time to be prepared for it. Real quick before we move on, take a look at these logos on the left image. You got the eye and CBS. You've got, what does that look like in Time Warner? Yeah, that's the all-seeing eye with the swirly hypnotic aspect to it. V for Victory. Everyone knows Disney has the 666. News Corp has this web or this, like a grid-looking thing around the world. Comcast, CC translates into 33 or 33. Huge number into the Masons. I'm just putting it out there. You can look it up if you're interested. Okay, so a lot of people like to think that, oh, yeah, Fox News is terrible. And, yeah, NBC or the Huffington Post or one of them, they're not always perfect. But I like how they write about this topic, or I lean towards that. And I got to point something out. They're not really in competition with each other, especially when they're under the same roof. We've all seen videos like this, so I'm only going to play like 30 or 40 seconds of it. But really, you got to pay attention. When they're literally reading the same script, something has to click.
In consumer news, economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Okay, you get the idea. You can look up other videos that show the exact same thing, but if you can see this and then not notice how they're literally reading the same script, they aren't always going to read the same script. But when it comes time to putting something out there we need to know about, economics, war, a brand new technology they're going to use to track us, they have a tendency to suddenly say the exact same thing. So you need to pay attention. And if you want to look up people like Rupert Murdoch and Ted Turner and the things they say, sometimes when it's related to population control, it's take note of who has control of what in this world. So really, when I talk about these different stations, they're different flavors of the same medicine. They're just made to look compete with one another because oftentimes it's not about news. It's about creating an issue and sides to the issue so that we keep fighting about the issue so they can have a predetermined outcome to said issue. Which brings the whole point back home to where we started. All right, so like I was saying earlier with 9/11, we got hit in the heart and we were traumatized. And we're emotional creatures and we're concerned about basics like, where's the society going? Who's going to hurt us? Or how are we going to be able to feed ourselves? What are our children going to think like? And we get hit in the heart with these little nicks and these little razors. Every single day we tune into this stuff. So you're going to notice every single major issue, they're going to pull in the race war, the gender war, any religion topic, guns and terrorism, they're getting married together easily. Police versus citizen, you name it, they're going to make an issue out of it. And it's this false dichotomy of left versus right, wrong versus right, fight or flight. And when you talk to somebody about, any of these topics, and this goes to truthers, I've tried to do this, and they kind of just go blank when you're talking to them. And then have you noticed sometimes over and over again they keep going back to the same topic? Like they start talking about something that hurts them in their heart. That's because that's what's going on. Every single person, whatever you feel like you're being hurt by or you're being outspoken by, you are being hurt by that and outspoken by it because that's the design. It's always this rage, this culture of outrage. They're cultivating what's going on. They're sending the same signal over and over again, pitting you and I against one another. Okay, so this is stuff that happens over a long period of time, and it can happen in your politics, your entertainment. You know what I'm talking about. This is a way bigger topic. I can go on and on and on. But you got to realize that what people believe in is in their heart, and then so reality begins in the heart. So does mind control. If somebody can insult you to such an extent you can't let it go, they can direct what you think and you say, indirectly at least. You can see my imagery of Donald Trump there. I can't, to people who are awake, he is beyond fake. People who are not awake, the more fake and outrageous they become, the more real they become. And this is the snare we're getting wrapped up in. So every time you take sides on any one of these issues, particularly if it's in social media and you just take pot shots at the other side, you are buying into a false premise. You're making it more real, or both sides are wrong. And if you truly are buying into it, you are giving up a piece of your identity every single time you do this, because now you're in a different box that you can't think outside of. I could really go on. I think you get the point. Maybe another video is required here because I really like this slide. My suggestion is you, the individual, the best I can say is stop buying into the false premise and unplug. Yeah, the more you're hurt by these issues, the more real they become. So if you're led by the heart through these issues, you're going to be led into a predetermined direction by somebody else. That's my point. You have to decide to get out of this because there will be no social justice. That's the point of this. It's endless division. So everyone hopes for all of us unifying and coming together, but it's not going to happen like that. It's a false promise. All right, that turned into a rant. I'm going to let it go. Let's jump ship to the alternative media. I'm going to make this quick. It's kind of a barren slide. But in the alternative media, you're going to find people who are some of the most intelligent, well-spoken people you've possibly heard from. They're in stark contrast to the visual of a conspiracy theorist. They really know how to discern from one thing or another. And you're going to run into everybody else too. And there's a wide variety of personalities. This is a good thing. In this community, you get to practice critical thinking skills, discernment, argumentative skills, if that's what you want to do. And the way I liken it to, it's like being a kid and you get to run free in an open arena, and you get to fall and skin your knee and get bruised from time to time, but you get back up and you're stronger for it and you've learned something from it instead of being spoon-fed the same information over and over again. That being said, the truth movement has its bad guys too, so we're going to point a few of them out right now. Controlled opposition, false gurus. So the people you see here are a slightly different breed of the same beast I was just talking about. Early on, I couldn't believe I was listening to Glenn Beck talk about this topic and that, and like I was agreeing with everything he was saying, and I was like, this is the guy that was too crazy for Fox News, and I grew up kind of liberal, so what's going on in my world? Here's how you quickly identify them. First things first, they are going to be giving you pieces of truth like videos like this, but they're going to be mixed with the agenda, and they're going to keep pulling you back into the way they want to see it. And anybody who has truth that's not supposed to be heard, they get stopped. So these people have big studios, they make lots of money, they collect your information, they never get shut down, and they never really have an answer for anything. They just kind of poke at the system and get you riled up. Alex Jones, second from the left, is perfect at that. It's all about the revolution. You're not going to take our guns. Us. It's always us versus them, too. There's Russell Brand. I pointed him out earlier. He's one of them. He flashes the signs. Over here on the right, lower right, you've got David Icke. And another guy most people don't really know, George Cavasilis, or I think it's Cavasilis. He's not as well known, but he's an example of the many, 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 many false gurus out there. And I'm just saying, if you keep searching blindly, there's always another one of these people pushing this spiritual awakeness that, there's a million versions of, and you'll just have to keep going until you find one person that's saying what you think you're hearing. He's one of them. He's a shill. I did believe in him for a little while. Lower left, Mark Dice. I don't think anybody believes in him anymore. He's kind of spent. He's a dried husk at this point. And the Young Turks, they're no good. I don't know. They just suck. That's my opinion. Anyway, but people I know who are not awake are definitely listening to him. I just wanted to glance over this real quick. People can say others. There are definitely others out there. You can voice your opinion below. And I'm going to let that go right there because this video is getting pretty long. Next up, we want to talk about why am I rushing through this so fast? You can hear it in my voice. We're going to talk about that right now. All right, so to have a clue of just how bad it might be right now, and if you don't really care about all the other stuff I was just talking about, and this is what you want to focus in on, and that's totally understandable, we need to take a step back to 2008 and see just how bad things almost became, because that was more than just a stumble in the markets, and it was more than just a ridiculous bailout or series of bailouts that happened. We very narrowly avoided a far worse situation that had been building for, at that point, some would say upwards of a decade. So I'm going to play about 3 minutes from a movie called Money for Nothing. I highly recommend the whole movie, but for this 3 minutes is near the beginning, and they hit right on just how close to a total disaster we hit, and then we'll talk about what followed after that.
How can the dollar be anything except the world's greatest monetary brand, the Coca-Cola of money? How can it be anything else but? Well, you just watch.
Since 1971, the U.S. dollar and the global financial system have been based solely upon faith. Faith in the guardian of that currency and of that system, the American Central Bank, the Federal Reserve. As the world's reserve currency, the U.S. dollar is how we measure our time, our products, our self-worth. Ours is a system based on trust and confidence, both of which began to disappear in the fall of 2007.
Plunging interest rates helped trigger the housing boom, but with interest rates climbing back, many homeowners are having a hard time paying their mortgages.
14 million people took a mortgage in the last 3 years. 7 million of them will lose their homes. This is crazy.
The Fed thought that this was a small problem. When the crisis was first talked about, this was a subprime mortgage problem. And it just kept growing and growing and growing.
Bear Stearns unraveling from some big bets on mortgages that have gone awry.
Government officials scrambling to prevent the collapse of the giant investment bank Lehman Brothers.
American International Group is seeking a $40 billion bridging loan from the Federal Reserve.
We are having an electronic run on the banks. The Federal Reserve's estimation was that $5.5 trillion would have been drawn out of the money market system of the United States, would have collapsed the entire economy, and within 24 hours, the world economy would have collapsed. It would have been the end of our economic system as we know it.
Congress could not act in a timely way. Therefore, the Fed felt like it was important to stabilize the economy that we do it. That is not the normal role for a central bank, nor should it be.
While politicians debated, the Fed acted. It used its political independence and unlimited power to create money, to provide trillions of dollars in loans to corporations of all kinds, dwarfing the congressional aid that followed.
What people on Main Street and most politicians didn't understand is that if we didn't do something, General Electric would have pulled down, Berkshire Hathaway would have pulled down, General Motors would have pulled down, Citigroup would have pulled down Bank of America.
I mean, we came to the brink of the abyss and we looked over, and it was a long way down. The Fed really did have to step in.
All right, so total economic collapse, not just in America, but worldwide. So pretty serious stuff. And again, I highly recommend the entire movie. It goes all the way back to the days leading up to the creation of the Federal Reserve, all the 20th century, and it really sets up the story for when Alan Greenspan jumped on board. And really pay attention, if you're going to watch it, really pay attention to his whole stretch from saving the economy in the 80s all the way to the first bailouts in the 90s, and watch him start to really change in the late 90s, early 2000s, because he's giving one set of statements in the early 2000s and then completely changes his story to the exact opposite by 2008, saying there's no way, he kept putting it on the open markets, saying, oh, we'll let the open markets, figure out this housing bubble that's going on. And then he turned right around and was like, well, what was I supposed to do? I don't know any of this stuff. Or, I can't control the markets, when they had clear control of everything. And during that time, he changed the GDP to hide certain measurements of what was going on in the bubble so that people couldn't pick up on what was coming up on 2008. I'm just pointing out that they have a tendency to kind of know what's going on and not tell us the truth. They are not stupid. So this movie goes on to talk about how the housing bubble wasn't resolved. I mean, you saw some numbers there, and depending when the topic's this big, you're going to see varying numbers, and they're not necessarily wrong or conflicting with one another. So I remember hearing we've spent $700 billion on those bailouts, when really you'll hear anywhere from like 16 to 27 trillion was put into play or guaranteed, not spent. But the last figure I heard was like $3, $4, or $5 trillion spent on toxic assets. I'll put a link below to an example of the Red Roof Inn, and that's our money they're spending. What they'll do is they'll print money. By the way, the Federal Reserve is a private bank cartel, so when they trade all these deals back and forth with the banks, they're just making a ton of money and transferring wealth back and forth, and I won't get too much into it. Point being, housing bubble, top left, turns into what they're calling here the government debt bubble. Here's a quick example, quick visual. We really just swap debt from one spot to another, and when they say U.S. government debt, that's you and me, all right? So what has happened since then? Are we in a better position since then, or are we in a worse position? Here's the trend. We've, with quantitative easing, rounds 1, 2, and 3, and probably soon to be 4, our monetary base has spiked, the value of the dollar has dropped, and we can't really afford to do that again. And only because we're currently the world reserve currency have we not hit hyperinflation just yet, although that money will come home someday. Total U.S. credit debt percentage as GDP, top right, you get the idea. I've seen the numbers a little bit different. On the left side, you see 1929, right before we crashed. Here we are in 2014, 15, going into 16. We have far more debt going on right now. And you can see how it just absolutely skyrockets out of the range of GDP. Lower left, kind of the same deal. And lower right, when they say that we're the wealthiest we've ever been in our history, that's because there's so few people who own the wealth and they're not putting it back into the country. And that's kind of why the infrastructure is getting ready to fall apart. Anybody who tells you the debt ceiling can be stopped or lowered is flat out lying to you. That is mathematically possible. Every dollar of currency that's printed into existence comes with debt. Therefore, the debt always increases faster than the amount of currency that's out there. I'm just saying. All right, so how could it be worse? Yeah, all right, yeah, we're terrible. We almost pulled the world economy down. Well, what else is going terribly? Well, the world's doing kind of the same thing. Here's 6 different areas. We got the UK, Russia, China, India, European Union, Japan. I don't actually subscribe to this article, this publication here. This is a nice clean way to show everything on one slide because these graphs get a little bit messy. Same deal. They're in a huge currency spike because they're going through a lot of what we're going through right now. Let me see here. That's India again, actually. I didn't realize that. So there's the Swiss. It's going on all across the world. And, of course, that means debt is also, that's, one graph for everything. Debt worldwide has spiked. It's unsustainable. Just going to let that sit out there. If we go through the same thing again that we went through before, there will be no stopping it. So take a look at what's going on in the markets right now. We have Royal Bank of Scotland. I put this in another video. He's using the word cataclysmic. When they're putting words like that out there, it might be a good idea to start listening. Oil prices, the way they're crashing, just today they're announcing that, they've said this before, but banks are expecting all kinds of oil-based loans to absolutely implode. They're going to take many billions of dollars of losses very soon. Expect rising costs of food. And just again, with this just popped up again today. This is going on worldwide. So it's the wealth gap that's going on everywhere. And they're showing just how many people have the same amount of wealth as supposedly half of the population. So even if this is even remotely true, going back to my earlier statement about how a lot of people know each other, you don't get this much wealth by being stupid. Okay? It's all who you know. And when the world is this out of balance, historically, there's always been a massive correction. And so the word cataclysm is not really an overstatement. Again, this is from today. This is the Baltic Dry Index. A lot of people keep bringing this up. They know about it more than I do. But it's at least a 30-year low. This is a 5-year chart. And it's dropping and dropping. What that means is there's no real production going on and there's no demand for materials. So worldwide, the economy is slowing down. Some of these charts I just showed with the lines, the hockey stick lines, I know there's other classifications of money like M1, M2, and M3. If you go to a link I'll put below, Mike Maloney's The Perfect Economic Storm is here. At least for America, he breaks that down to show how it's actually makes it even kind of worse. There's far more currency out on Wall Street than there used to be, and there's less on Main Street than there was in 2008. So we actually have less to work with as you and I in the economy. He also points out that all these gifts to Wall Street, as he calls them, all these bailouts, all this quantitative easing, that's really why, a big part of the reason why the markets are up all the time. As soon as they stop, it tends to crash. It's being artificially inflated all the time. Okay, that's me rambling and rambling. That's that. What other bad news can we heap on the mountain while I'm at it? Let's just really ruin everyone's day. Okay, here's my last topic. Seems a little extreme, right? But if you look at the news, they keep putting words like this out in headlines because they're kind of prepping you for something that's coming. I'll just go over, it's a giant entanglement that's going on. That's my point. Do you remember what happened in World War I? I don't remember the whole thing, but there was an entanglement so that when the assassination happened, Germany would attack France and then turn right around and attack Russia, and everyone got pulled in at once. Well, this situation right now is that on steroids. running through a couple of things. Russia versus Turkey, they had the jet getting shot down. Well, Turkey's a part of NATO, and that involves all those countries in that little chart right there. We've got China has been making territorial claims in the water against the U.S. and Japan. Japan has recently reactivated its military for offensive roles. China has oil concerns in Iran, so we've got the Saudi Arabian-Iran connection right there, and that draws the U.S. in a little bit more. Kim Jong-un found it. Just did the H-bomb test. We haven't proven it, but it's creating a need to send more of an attention to South Korea, North Korea. There's U.S. sanctions against Iran just posted today, and it just keeps getting more and more and more entangled. We just had 2 incidents where Iran fired off rockets near a U.S. ship, and then a few days later, 10 U.S. sailors are in Iranian custody. Didn't turn into anything. If you pay attention, it keeps creeping forward and forward and forward, and every one of these nations has some say in the war on terror, and they want to fight against the war on terror. And then if you look at the proxy war in Syria, in a glance, you know what I'm talking about. It's the same entanglement yet again. And the thing is, everybody kind of has a rightful claim against somebody else about terrorism, so all it takes is a spark in one place or another to set the whole thing off. If you're anything like me, so these guys are in the mix. So if you're anything like me and you see all these things combining all at one time, some alarm bells go off. It's probably more than a coincidence. This has been done in the past. Major political shifts tend to happen at the exact same time as major economic shifts. You can read into it whatever you want. Just saying, you might want to start getting ready, and you might want to pay attention to what's going on. All right, I've let this drag on pretty far. Let's bring this home. Final thoughts. Do your own research. Don't listen to any single one person. Don't just buy what I say. And that's why I've stuck to context and, themes. That's why I'm not hitting you too much with here's why this happens, here's why that happens. What I've noticed is that I tend to believe things after I've seen them for the 10th or the 20th time in a brand new context. That means it's more than just spurious. Don't wait. We're miles deep into borrowed time. You've heard doomsday timelines and doomsday talk for so long now because it could happen any day. It's that bad. It's just not quite time yet. So every day that we have is a blessing. Please, do whatever your research, talk to anybody, get the word out. You've got to make up your own mind as the individual and stand your ground. Don't let other people talk you out of it because some people are just too attached to what they think this life is. I have that question. What would you do if everyone around, you and everyone around you lost everything you had? If you still have emotional connections to it, when it gets ripped away from you, I don't know how you're going to be able to respond. And just remember what I said about 9/11, how traumatized we were when that happened, and the sheer amount of propaganda, I'll say, we were hit with. And it was a lot of programming we went through, and we went through a lot. That's going to happen on a much larger scale very soon. In fact, it's happening every day. So, again, my recommendation is unplug, start researching. I'm going to put as much information below as I can, and because it's, no one can tell you what to believe. So that's why I'm going to end on this one thought. Nobody told me to believe this. I had to find it myself, and so I can't tell you. What I found during all this is that I had a feeling in my heart throughout my whole life, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. And by learning all this, I found out that for me, it meant accepting Jesus Christ into my life, and that it turns out I have a love for him that I never really knew about. So for me, when I accepted it, it was like remembering an old friend in my life. And I'm extending an invitation to anyone who wants to avoid the fragmented mess of everything I just talked about and just accept, there is one singular truth in the world, and this is me. This is my call to action. So there is a God, there is Jesus. They do love you. And actually what I'm discovering is I love you too. That's, as a guy, it's a little hard to say, but there it is. So again, if it's a little early for you to believe that, that's fine. I'm not forcing it on you. Our job in the body of Christ is to hold the door open as long as possible to get as many people to come home as possible. And that's where I'll leave it. So thank you for watching. Please post any questions, comments, subscribe, like. If you don't like it, or if you know people who are going to make fun of it, pass it on to them anyway. I don't care if they don't like it. Let's just get the message out there and get talking about it. If there's anything I didn't cover you'd like to know about, put up a comment. We'll see where it goes. All right, I've talked long enough. Thank you so much for sitting through all this. Please do your research. God bless all of you, and I'll talk to you again in the next video.